Hi everyone, my name is Sohee and I am a PhD student in history at Columbia University in New York. And today, my working paper discusses the intersections between the form of folk art and national crafts, with its economic and social significance in the process of constructing a new Soviet society in Central Asia. My paper examines the kustar handicraft industry from the perspective of folk art and artistic industry using the example of carpet. I will tentatively argue that handicraft production in the form of cooperatives played a key role during the process of collectivization and industrialization via way of penetrating the countryside, and that the way in which handicrafts were produced was closely associated with their output. The idea of folk handicraft in Central Asia needs to be seen within the context of sweeping changes that were occurring in the countryside. In the late 1920s, independent artisans working in craft production were rapidly forced to enter producers' cooperatives. Structural changes of the Soviet Union in the late 1920s and early 1930s decimated traditional handicraft sectors. The dissolvement of traditional craft villages or clusters, the prioritizing of state industries, and the transfer of labor to large state industries, as well as forced collectivization of agriculture, caused lasting changes to the craft landscape of the city and the countryside. Against this backdrop, authorities alerted alarm bells to the status of handicraft manufacturing in the village. Organizations in carrying out collectivization had gone too far against the kustar handicraft industry. The concern was not so much the preservation of cultural folk heritage, but was related to the need to penetrate and engage the village, especially local women, and to increase the real wages of handicraft people through export. For the sake of setting up the picture, let us start with a picture of Central Asia in the 1890s, when commentators on Central Asian handicraft industry remarked on the relative insignificance of handicraft trade of the region for industrialized Russia. Imperial administrators, especially the Ministry of State Domains and local officials, were interested in elucidating the possibilities for Russian industrial and trade capital in the Central Asian market. One of the studies from this time is Sofia Alexandrovna Davidova's kustar handicrafts in Central Asia. Although the work was criticized in scholarly circles as being narrowly utilitarian and having paid insufficient attention to traditions of folk art and craft in the region, it nonetheless shed light on the way in which Central Asian craft was viewed from the perspective of commodity. Davidova found that local handicraft trade was either pursued as a main method of livelihood for town residents or as an ancillary activity to supplement agricultural production. She claimed that, quote, the peculiar system of life, custom, and habits and demand of Central Asian inhabitants left a special imprint on the products of local handicraftsmen, end quote. The unique characteristics of the locally produced goods meant that they had limited significance for European markets. For example, silk fabric woven in Turkestan was considered unsuitable for European taste due to its narrow width and the heavy starch used to stiffen the fabric. Although this treatment was well suited to crafting robes for local inhabitants that had limited use outside the region, their particular characteristics restricting the ability for this product to be applied for general domestic use. One exception to the rule of local particularity was in the form of carpets. Eastern or Oriental carpets had entered into wide household use, not just in Russia, but in Europe. And even so, according to Statistics and Trade, the volume of carpet trade in Russia and Central Asia, including carpets transported from Turkestan, Bukhara, Khiva, and the Teke Oasis, was not particularly significant. The sum of carpets that were transported by railroad in 1889 was around 26,000 rubles, and considering the high value of carpets, did not represent a significant portion of the economy. This is another statistic that shows statistics for the Trans-Caspian Oblast, and which roughly corresponds to present-day Turkmenistan, and the figures are albeit a little bit higher, but still did not make up a significant volume of trade. The local handicraft industry was judged insignificant as to revolutionize trade in the form that they existed. On the other hand, the patterns on textiles was judged as a way to import goods manufactured in Russian manufactories and market them to the local population. Furthermore, although the significance of Central Asian handicrafts as a worthwhile commodity was downplayed, the region's potential for raw materials such as cotton and silk was emphasized. Having seen the way in which locally produced goods was seen from the perspective of industrialized regions in Imperial Russia, I want to fast forward and turn toward the late 1920s and early 1930s to discuss the role of handicraft artistic production in a time of rapid construction of Soviet society after the end of the new economic policy. I ask how handicraft and artisanal production, although considered an outdated mode of production that should be replaced by large state industry, continues to be tolerated and used for building of a socialist society. It should also be noted that at the same time, scientific expeditions on carpet weaving practices, culture, and way of life was conducted. For example, a scientific expedition of carpet weaving was conducted in 1929 in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, by the Eastern Department of the Central Asian State University and the Committee to Improve Labor and Way of Life of Women of the East, part of the Council of Central Asian Economy. Other expeditions continued throughout the 1930s and up to the Second World War, and often the results had practical applications in informing contemporary carpet weaving practices. Hence, we see how ethnographic study of the carpet weaving as a craft was closely tied to economic aspects of the craft, specifically how to engage and draw women into the labor market and Soviet society. I will now focus on the significance of handicraft in the form of cooperatives in the process of industrialization. The directives given in the 15th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1927 highlighted the need to pay attention to small-scale industry and handicraft production in the national republics and oblasts. The important role that the local handicraft producers played in the economic life of national republics was a reason why the handicraft industry and the cooperativization of the handicraft industry was significant. The large proportion of small commodity producers in the national regions further testified to this idea. In particular, in addition to the agricultural sector, which has been well documented, those engaging in small kustar production, small commodity kustar production as a primary or a subsidiary pursuit made up a large proportion of the population in Soviet national republics. A decree of the Council of People's Commissars in 1928 defined the goals of manufacturing cooperatives as using local materials, helping to meet demand for consumer goods, particularly in rural areas, and to reduce demand and stress on state enterprises. Producers' cooperatives were present in industries such as building materials and consumer goods, as well as handicrafts. These producers' cooperatives were a way to provide goods, services, and labor at a lower cost as a supplementary element to state networks of production. For example, an argument was presented for establishing a local supply of prepared dyed wool yarn, as using the facilities of spinning factories in Leningrad was impractical, as the dyed yarn would need to be sent to Turkmenistan, woven into carpets in Turkmenistan, and then the finished carpets having to be taken back to Leningrad to be exported. Cooperatives were outlined in the first 5-year plan as producing goods to satisfy consumer demands and utilizing materials that would otherwise have been discarded by state enterprise. Moreover, the use of contracted labor was an important way to extend the labor resources of the Soviet labor force. These cooperatives, especially in the light industry sector, required minimal capital investment and could be labor intensive. The carpet industry in Turkmenistan, for example, required rudimentary tools, simple looms, scissors, and only required the supplying of dyed yarn. Previous research by scholars has remarked that unlike the netmen or capitalists, there was no wholesale attempt to liquidate artisans and kustar handicraft workers as a class. Rather, it was expected that the sector of small industry would wither away and be replaced by large-scale industry. However, as the distinction between small capitalists and artisans was often murky, the end result was that many craftsmen were hit with high taxes and their equipment and tools of the trade seized in many cases. In the villages, many were treated like kulaks and liquidated. Throughout this period, however, we also see attempts to roll back some of the harsher interpretations that targeted the handicraft sector. An all-union committee attached to the Committee of Labor and Defense was established in April 21st, 1930, raising the status of artisanal industry. A resolution by Sovnarkom of June 1930, published after a partial retreat from harsh collectivization drives in the spring of 1930, stated that the local organs had, quote, underestimated the role of kustar handicraft industry and manufacturing cooperatives, end quote, and that high taxes for artisans and their associations were improperly assessed, and that central directives which guaranteed the growth of handicraft industries were not carried out. It maintained in 1930 that the handicraft industry had great meaning in the national economy. Furthermore, the decree urged the People's Commissars of Agriculture of the USSR to remedy extreme measures in the relations of the kolkhoz with the manufacturing cooperatives. Individual manufacturing artels were guaranteed existence as independent organizations. It called on the Council for All Union Cooperatives to draw into manufacturing cooperatives all artisans in regions with full collectivization. Further directives from Sovnarkom later in the summer of 1930 covered the need for the all union cooperatives and Republican organs of manufacturing cooperatives to shift attention to areas with full collectivization. Hence, the importance of distinguishing between agricultural work and handicraft manufacturing was upheld at a time of partial retreat from the rapid pace of agricultural collectivization in the countryside. I will now examine the rhetoric of artisanal cooperatives in the realm of handicrafts and their role in the process of collectivization. The process of cooperativization of carpet weaving is a significant case in point. In 1930, it was estimated that women carpet weavers in Turkmenistan numbered around 137,000, with only a quarter of the number working at the same time. Only up to 20,000 were working to produce carpets for the market, as opposed to for domestic production. The Producers Cooperative for Carpets in Turkmenistan, which was established in 1926 and saw fast growth in its initial years of conception. It grew from 463 people in 1926 to around 18,000 in 1930, making up 15% of Turkmen women who had carpet weaving knowledge and around 50% of those who were actually engaged in carpet manufacturing. The preferred arrangement for cooperatives was organization in common workshops in which the producers would socialize modes of production. However, they were relatively insignificant in the carpet industry. The more significant arrangement for handicraft carpet weavers was a contractual relationship with the cooperatives working from their homes to produce carpets. The number of carpet weavers who were connected with the cooperative through a contract numbered 17,500 by 1929. The significance of the number of contracted carpet weavers can be contrasted with the number of people who had entered common workshops, which in effect made up only 1% of the total number of workers associated with the Turkmen Carpet Cooperative in 1931. The crucial significance these contractual relationships had for the carpet cooperative can be seen in the following. In mid-1931, when one-year contracts of carpet weavers expired, the number of contracted members of the cooperative declined to about 7,500 people, resulting in a steep decline of quality and quantity for cooperative orders. The contractual argument stipulated providing handicraft materials as well as marketing the finished carpet. Other agreements and fees existed in the form of a guarantee, supplying of wool, dyes, and entrance fees. In many cases, there were fines for mistakes in production of carpets of a different size or for unfulfilled parts of the agreement. With the high illiteracy rates among artisans, this around 95% of women workers, this made for a confusing set of arrangements that hindered the cooperativization of artisans. Although the collective workshops were designed to play a leading role in setting the example for the cooperativization of carpet workers, in reality, they were ineffective at best. There was little in the means of socialization of production, little in the means of organized industrial or productive activity, other than the idea that weavers had aggregated carpet weaving looms under one roof. Thus, the earnings for handicraft artisans in the workshop remained at the same level for those working at home, around 50 kopecks a day. And similarly, there was little incentive along the line of supply of necessary food products for those working in workshops. The ineffectiveness of the general workshops was a great disadvantage for the restructuring of carpet cooperatives in the sense that anti-Soviet elements could compete with the collective workshop using abundant materials. And the agitation of the buy element hindered the cooperativization efforts and restructuring towards collective workshops. The looms procured by the Inter-Region Industrial Union were sold at high prices to kustar artisans for their individual use. This went against the idea of socialization of work and played into the hands of wealthier artisans who could afford the loom. The need to strengthen cooperativization of carpet weaving was given in the most dire terms in relation to collectivization of agriculture in a key border region. The need to employ surplus labor in the countryside was cited as a crucial reason. This fact can be seen by how the regions that had the greatest rate of collectivization of agriculture, namely Merv, Tejan, and Krasnoteke provinces, also coincided with the main carpet weaving regions of Turkmenistan. A report from 1931 cited that even in the months that are most occupied with agriculture, the percent of free women's labor ranged from 40 to 50% between the months of February and August. This percentage would be even higher in winter months when the possibility to engage in agriculture was more limited. Quote, involving the masses and providing supplementary earnings to agriculture is an important political and economic task. The task of strengthening young, fast-growing, and developing collective agriculture in Turkmenistan on the border of Persia, Afghanistan, and India. The greatest and real possibility for this lies in the sector of carpet manufacturing cooperatives, which is all possibilities for maximal growth. The rationale for cooperativization thus emerged as a method by which to provide a supplementary earning to agriculture. The role for cooperatives explains the relative scarcity of women engaged in producers' cooperatives as a function of working in general workshops, as opposed to those who were in contractual relationships. The possibility of raising the actual wages of the village carpet weavers was more pronounced because the bulk of carpets were destined for export. The system of from Soviet All-Union Congress of Manufacturing Cooperatives had a role to play in delivering products manufactured in republic and in regional handicrafts to organs for export, such as the organ carpet and handicraft export established in 1929. Trade organizations such as Amtorg or Arcos provided suggestions and guidelines on what products would be suitable for the foreign market. The link between the kind of labor and cultural heritage was emphasized in a later document from 1969. The number of artisans working in general workshops and common workshops increased during the first 5-year plan, making up 38.5% of cooperative workers in 1927 to 61.4% in 1932. In subsequent years, the number continued to grow, but at a lower rate. The numbers are lower for industries such as lace making or carpet weaving, which saw 95 to 98% of workers working at home. In the period from 1948 to 1950, the work of handicraftsmen was lumped together with private enterprise and hence assessed heavy taxes by financial organs. The practice of contractual work outside the common workshop was more restricted to the disabled population and women who did not otherwise have the possibility to work in manufacturing. The curtailment of at-home work in other regions of the Soviet Union also coincided with a sharp curtailment of masters or artisans working in the artistic industry, and in some craft traditions, almost to total disappearance. Handicrafts, marginalized as a mode of production, emerged as salient within the concept of national cultures in the Soviet Union. An emphasis on national distinctiveness fostered and encouraged the development of folk art along lines of national patterns and ornaments, even as policies under Stalin sought to curtail explicit nationalist sentiment. The 1930s marked a definite shift toward the institutionalization of carpet weaving, away from home industry and in the realm of the workshop. In March of 1932, the Scientific Research Institute of Artistic Industry was established by the Council of the All-Union Soviet of Producers Cooperatives. Each socialist republic had a manufacturing cooperative and council, which oversaw the different carpet factories and workshops. At the republic level, Soviet Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and Armenia had carpet unions, while other republics had individual workshops and factories. In addition to revolutionizing the production and distribution of carpet making, the new institute was involved with reviving classical carpet ornaments. Classic historic patterns were revived through research and new patterns were developed. Ornaments from Soviet life, such as airplanes or the 5-pointed Soviet star, were sometimes woven into the fabric. These new motifs were incorporated with the more classic designs. In other cases, new genres of carpets were created in the form of portrait carpets, ringed by national patterns, or plot carpets on themes such as industrialization, oil rigs, and more. This is an example of a thematic carpet depicting a horse race run from Ashgabat to Moscow in the 1930s, and you can also see a woman weaving in the carpet workshop in Turkmenistan. The Scientific Research Institute provided oversight and assistance to individual artels. The artistic sector and the carpet sector provided feedback on sketches and drawings made for carpets, as well as the finished products themselves made in individual workshops. A typical review of carpet products would involve cadres from the Research Institute commenting on the artistic and technical qualities of the carpet, including the evenness of the pile, the implementation of design, and the use of colors. Artists, technicians, and experts from the Institute embarked on official trips to report on the various conditions of carpet making in the various republics. One trip, for example, involved experiments to test out the chlorination of yarn in various workshops in order to standardize it according to best practices developed by the Institute. Another trip involved travel to the Kazakh SSR in 1938 to visit the carpet-making artel Kobrovshchita. The researcher in charge had found that the workshop was ill-equipped to develop and design Kazakh ornamental patterns. Weavers were making carpets, he noted, using patterns and designs from the Caucasus. Some patterns, he disapprovingly noted, were formed from a combination of ornaments from the Caucasus and Central Asia, an unacceptable condition for a carpet produced in the Kazakh SSR. In order to improve the weaving conditions of the artel, several suggestions along the lines of design and technology were proposed. One such suggestion was providing short-term courses organized by the union cooperatives in Kazakh SSR, which would elevate the level of craftsmanship in the Republic and in the workshop. Another suggestion involved bringing in multiple copies of acceptable patterns and drawings from the Institute. The report stated that a few copies of the approved drawings prepared by artists of the Scientific Institute were enthusiastically received by the workers at the artel. The Kazakh women, the report noted, were especially happy with the designs that were brought in and were eager to weave with them, stating that they had not seen such designs for a long time. We thus see further interactions between the collecting of ethnographic knowledge and design and expeditions and research into folk patterns employed in practical application. And to conclude, a close examination of the ways in which certain forms of, just to show some other examples of carpets that were produced in the Soviet period, and you see other examples of just the categorization of carpets according to tribe and carpet tradition. A close examination of the ways in which certain forms of folk handicraft was used as part of socialist construction allows us to complicate the picture of Soviet socialist construction. We see certain limitations of socialization of production in common workshops or continuation of labor-intensive production. We also see ways in which carpet handicraft production, despite not opposing ideals of rationalized production, was seen as an important step in exposing women in villages of Turkmenistan to socialist institutions and forms of labor, and in helping bolster success of other collectivization efforts, most notably in agriculture. In this way, carpet makers, while essentially using traditional techniques of carpet weaving, were in many cases able to divorce carpets from previous associations with backwardness of traditional societies and claim that they represented a new Soviet consciousness. And that is what I have so far. Thank you.